Welcome to today's episode of In Conversation With, being filmed at the Harvey Nash Group offices, which is fun because I can actually sit next to today's guest, Amandine, which is, well, it's lovely to be able to do this again after, what, a year and a half of having to film not in person and kind of trying to read someone's emotions over Zoom. So thank you for taking the time to come in.
Thanks for having me. That's a fantastic excuse to do that in real life. I love it.
So look, you're co-founder and CEO of Wild Meta. You're also a recipient of a Rising Star Award from We Are the City, so congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Look, before we get into anything else, let's try and unpick who Wild Meta are.
Sure, so Wild Meta, we are a small team based in London, and our objective is to support video games developers by helping them create smarter and more human-like game AIs. And so when we talk about game AIs in games, we're talking about non-playable entities. So we're talking about what controls the decision of these entities. For example, if you're playing a game, well, you're playing sometimes against what we call the computer. We used to call that years ago. And so basically, it's just the game AI that controls the enemy, for example, or other players in the game. And so we are using machine learning. We have already developed our entire machine learning system that enables us to create game AIs that are powered by machine learning.
So when you're talking about working with studios, I imagine that you're entering a market here where there's already a vast number of organisations in this area. Like gaming is a huge industry, right? Is it something like 4 times the size of the film industry?
It's huge and it's growing. It has grown a lot since the pandemic, and it's massive now, yeah.
So how do you even start as a new company? I mean, when was the business formed?
We started in 2019.
Right. How do you try and make waves in that market where you're obviously up against some fairly established names?
So the video game industry, especially in the UK, it's very much community focused. And all my life, I've worked with industries that are very much focused on communities. And so you approach it like you would approach any other tight community by getting to know the people, by going to events, and by, showing your face here and there all the time, so people can't just not see you. So that's what we've been doing, but the pandemic hasn't helped because there haven't been any real life event where you can actually build this relationship. So the thing is, because what we do is very technical also, it's not just about finding our place in this big industry, but it's also about talking about technology when everyone just wants to talk about games and the cool stuff, the creative parts, the everything that makes a game really cool, and game AIs are part of it, but they don't necessarily want to talk about machine learning and tech, and we get into all the details. So it's more about driving adoption of a new technology. That's the real challenge, rather than getting into the game industry.
So you have a content channel called Entrepreneurs Playing Games. Yeah. When you're talking about community and talking to that group of companies, how has that played a role in that?
Well, I don't know if it really plays a role in my startup. I would say I've started this project before I started Wild Meta. And the idea is really to show what it's like to build a company at an early stage. Talk about the challenges and what you're really going through, and not just hear about it once it's been years since we've been through this step. You know what I mean? When you go to most events, especially here in London, you go to lots of networking events, you usually have some founders highlighted, but founders are already successful. They already made it, right? But when you're an early stage company, it doesn't really answer your question. They're talking about some strategies they've been using or other things, and it doesn't necessarily apply directly to what you do. So I wanted to have a space where people can ask questions about what it's like to be an early stage founder.
I know you say that it doesn't necessarily tally into the kind of the day-to-day job effectively of Wild Meta, but at the same time, if you're approaching a company, right, and they're going to trust you with a fairly serious bit of technology that is going to help their game, then surely getting to understand you, your journey, your backstory, that does help in a way, because it makes you so much more authentic.
That's right, yes. And well, in one way, I'm learning a lot from my guests and from the people I focus on and I interview. I learn a lot from the small community I've been building. But you're right, yes, it definitely gives some kind of access to my life and to things I've been through before, my entire experience. And I usually on the stream talk a lot about our own experience at World Meta, how we've tried things, and it's a discussion, right? So you kind of add always something about your personal life and experience. So yes, definitely, if studios want to know more about me, they can check out my YouTube channel and they'll see a lot of me. Yes.
So AI and machine learning, and maybe we should talk about machine learning rather than AI. I don't know, I kind of feel that
AI can be confusing because game AI, there's no machine learning in it. Like
right.
Game AIs are just the system to control the entities. So let's talk about machine learning, yes.
It's an area where skills are in huge demand. I mean, if we think about engineers, you can literally be hitting your head against a brick wall for months trying to get people to come into your business who are earning extortionate day rates. How have you found the talent to help you grow this, to be able to put together the technology that you can then obviously take to the studios?
Well, it's easy for me because I have my co-founder and he's amazing. I mean, he's been building the entire tech on his own. So we haven't yet hired and grew the team, and I hope it will happen soon. We already have identified some people we'd love to work with. And also because what we do is very specific. It's kind of at the intersection between research and application in the sense that there is, when you talk to people about game AIs using machine learning, people will usually think about research organization using games to show their machine learning technology. So what we do is much more applied, but still it's kind of at the intersection because we've had to work on research and develop our own system to start with. So my co-founder has been amazing on that, but because we have such special place, I would say. People are very interested in what we do, and so I've had some people coming to us with machine learning skills and a passion for video games, and there's not that many people doing what we do today, so if they are interested in the topic, they naturally come to us. But at the moment, it's just my co-founder and I.
You touched on an area there that's quite interesting. A lot of people do apply game mechanics to real-life problems, so yes. You hear about people talking about how town planning and transport can be improved by game mechanics. Is there a temptation to pivot away from game studios to perhaps, I don't know, we're in London, TfL, I'm not suggesting specifically that, but an organisation like that and go, you know what, our models, our game mechanics, our game AI can really help you plan and make sure that you're, especially now after the pandemic when so much has changed for these organisations, plan to be more effective or more efficient rather over 6 months, a year or so?
We've been thinking about that because, the game industry is a growing industry, but it's also an industry where it takes a long time to close a deal. You have to fit into the calendar of games, and so studios have their own calendar, so you have to understand how you're going to fit into that, come at the right moment, so that's kind of long sales cycles. So we've been thinking about it, but what we do is very specific, and also we are not just using a model that we are just reusing in the different games, but the idea is to create and develop specifically for one game, one model that is going to be used to train the AI, and then for each game. So it's really game focused and game specific, which means that there is a part that we're reusing, which is our system, but then every game AI is different for each game. So we are less tempted to pivot because that will be creating something very different, another problem. That will be almost creating an entire new company. We pivoted our business model in January, and just that felt like starting a company from scratch already. So I understand the temptation sometimes when you're building a product that could easily be adapted to a different industry, but in our case, that would be very different, I think.
I suppose going back to that ask questions aspect of talking to other founders through Entrepreneurs Playing Games, an element about that must be keeping focus and understanding what problem you're trying to fix, and not necessarily just chasing the ball effectively.
Yes, I'm learning a lot from each of my guests, from their own experience, from their own doubt, from their own learning, from their own mistakes. It's very interesting for that, just to try to understand, okay, so they've done this, they ended up with this situation, how can this apply to me? And I feel that's also what my community is benefiting from these interviews, yeah.
So we mentioned at the top about We Are the City's Rising Star Award. What does that mean to you?
Well, that's super exciting. I mean, I have been involved in the startup ecosystem for quite some time now. I mean, all my career I've been involved in startup, but since I moved to London, I've been very much involved in the community here. And so being able to be recognized for your work as an entrepreneur, that has been my first award as an entrepreneur, so that's extremely exciting and rewarding, to be recognized as a founder now, but also to be able to be a voice and represent all the founders I interview, but also just all the founders in the community, and just being able to show that you have different type of founders. Founders are not just fitting into one box, but actually you have lots of different type of founders. And yeah, that's important for me to show that.
Do you think it helps with perhaps confidence or credibility or, I suppose, validity? You said there about giving you a voice. I mean, before an award, you had a voice, you already had started that platform, but what is it about it that really benefits being able to be part of that community and not just part of it, but a spokesperson for it?
Well, there are different things. So I would say the first thing that comes to mind is that you're part of a community, as you say. So you have access to new people. You can maybe reach out to some of these people. You're invited to events. You have some opportunities. For example, here today, we're here together, and that's an opportunity that happens through that. So you have some new opportunities, but also being more down to earth, I would say also that's an opportunity to talk about what you do again and expand your network, show what you're working on to more people that may be out of reach or just not part of your direct network. So that's a way also of growing your own community and your own reach.
Now, as a rising star, you're probably a really good role model to, if we're talking about young women who are in education now, you're an excellent role model to them, because they would probably be able to identify with you. And not only that, but you're a female in two industries that I suppose typically people probably think of men, white men, kind of dominating in terms of both technology and gaming. So if you're talking to that audience who is, let's say, 14, 15, 16, coming up towards GCSEs perhaps in this country, but moving from secondary education to further education, what would you say to them to keep them interested in STEM, interested in science and mathematics, and make sure that we don't potentially lose people from the industry at that point?
Well, I think they have an amazing opportunity is that I didn't have back then, and my parents clearly didn't have, is that you have so much knowledge now available. You have, of course, class, and you have to go to school, and you're learning and you're getting a degree, and that's good if it works for you. But there's also a vast amount of knowledge that you can just learn and be a sponge. And when you're young, that's the perfect moment to have side projects. Sometimes when you're getting a bit older, you want to do more things, but you're always limited with your time, right? And so you also need to think about, is it actually working with my main project? I can't have like 10 side projects. And I think when people come to my profile, sometimes they think I have too many. So I think if when you're young, that's actually the best time to experiment, to try new things, to subscribe to lots of YouTube channels on different topics, to spend your evening watching some documentaries, and maybe try some side project on the side, building something or trying to write a piece of software, whatever the challenge you want to have. So I'm really excited that you say I can be a role model, because you don't really think about that. You just think, as a founder, I just want to spread the word. And if you can answer some people's questions about what it's like to found your own company, that's amazing. If you can actually inspire other people to do that, that's great. When it comes to younger people, I don't really have that many people that are at this stage around me, but I would love to do more, because I think that's the moment where you think about what you want to do and what really interests you.
And when you look at figures who inspire you, what qualities do you think they have that you try and apply to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis?
I never really had some kind of figure that I looked up for. I tried to instead learn a bit from everyone. And so that's what I've done all my career. You know, you have an opportunity to, I don't know, do an internship here or have a placement there. Then I try to focus on a few people and just try to take a bit of everything of these people, and leave the company or leave the internship or whatever with something with me, some additional learning, not just what I've learned during the job, but actually something from these people's experience. So I try to make them talk, and try to make them share what they've learned, the mistakes they've made, the challenges, how they think through things. And so that's something I've done all my life, and without necessarily looking at someone specifically.
So look, just a last question. Obviously, you're involved in the gaming industry. There's a huge amount of games out there. There's probably a lot of interest around non-playable characters right now, because you've got films like Free Guy in the cinema, kind of highlighting the roles that they play in games. But as someone involved in the industry, what kind of game would you most want to be working on with a studio?
The beauty, I would say, of what we do is that we can work with any kind of games. So our technology is really enables us to create custom game AI for each game, which means we can work with any type of game, any kind of studios, and so there are a bunch of different applications and benefits depending on the type of game. So, for example, multiplayer games are great games for us because there are already lots of bots within these games, but you don't know about it, or you know because they are not great. So when you're a player, you play and you spot the bots because they are not really good and they are more target practices. With our technology, we can create bots that react to the player's move. And so basically, a player doesn't really need to know if that's a human or not playing. What if they can't tell? And so that's exactly the kind of thing we're trying to push for studios, when we want them to understand that game AIs don't need to be scripted. They can actually just learn to play the game and then play like any human do. So multiplayer games are great for that. There's also lots of games where you have a squad team. And so when you have a squad team, you usually control one character and then give some orders to other characters. But then the rest of the time they do whatever they want. And so what if these characters were actually helping you, instead of going to the other direction while the fight is in front of you? So all these different games have all some specificities, and depending on the game, there's so many benefits of using machine learning bots. So I would be excited to work on any of these, to be honest.
I think AI could probably mimic my ability at gaming right now, to the point that you'd think it was, because I am useless at most games. But look, it's been a pleasure to speak to you and to be able to do this in person. If someone wanted to find out a little bit more about Wild Meta, how would they do that?
They can check out the website, wildmeta.com, or reach out to me anytime, either via email, social media, or just to have a coffee in London.
Perfect. Well, look, thank you for joining us today. Thank you as well for tuning in to this episode of In Conversation With. There are plenty more videos that you can have a look at on the Harvey Nash Group website, but equally, go and check out the Tech Women 100 Awards.